Welcome to our Leadership Professional Development Series to help you speak, sound, and look like a leader. Today, we'll be discussing how to create a positive culture within your leadership team. I'm Linda Katz-Wilner, founder of Successfully Speaking, and I work with leaders and aspiring leaders to help them improve their executive presence as well as their communication skills. And I'm so excited today to have a dear friend and colleague, Karen Snyder, join us today. Karen is the owner and lead consultant at Concordia Consulting. And Karen and I met several years ago because we're both members of the DC chapter of the National Speakers Association. So I'm so excited to talk to Karen about culture and learn more from her today from her expertise. Welcome, Karen.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you for inviting me. It's my favorite topic.
Oh,
Wait a minute. Next to the other topics we talked about, like gardening, flowers, family, and travel. But it's my favorite business topic for sure.
business professional topic,
It
true.
is. It is. I love it.
And Karen, let me start by asking you, first of all, well, how do you define culture when you're talking about culture in an organization?
Well, it's a slippery slope. It's not an it's a very difficult word to define. Culture means many different things to different people. Um, but it's the way you feel when you walk into the organization. And now that sometimes we're not walking into organizations, it's the feel you get even in the Zoom room. Are people paying attention? Are they smiling? Are they engaged? Who talks with whom? When one person speaks, does everybody stop talking and listen, or do they talk over them?
Hmm.
All of that is the culture. I used to say that I could tell a lot about the culture of an organization as soon as I walked into the building.
Hmm.
How was I greeted? How long did it take for me to get from the sidewalk into the person I was supposed to meet with? All of those form your initial experiences of that organization. And that is the beginnings of culture. But of course, it means much, much more than that.
And I'm going to ask you this question because I work with many international clients. And so when I think of culture, besides what you're talking about, I think about the different cultural differences because people come from different countries and they deal with the workplace or with their colleagues differently. And so how does that fit into the culture when you work
Well,
with a company?
well, that certainly has a huge influence. And certainly companies that have started outside of the United States have a different culture. It may, some of it is tangible. Um, how many, how do they measure sick leave? How do they deal with sick
Mm.
leave? How do they handle vacation? How do they give performance appraisals? And if so, what do they put on the performance appraisal?
Mm.
It's fascinating. I was working with a company just last week, and they're at the beginnings of developing their first performance appraisal. And I was trying to stress with them how important it is as we work together on the development of this. What do you want your company to look like? Because what you measure is
Mm.
what happens, and what happens creates culture. So all of this, it's kind of like saying, how do you evaluate so many different aspects. But as a leader, what a leader wants to think about is, well, how long does it take to get from the sidewalk into my
Mhm.
organization? Well, when I'm in a meeting, do people defer to me? And if so, what are we losing in terms of their intellectual knowledge and what they might be sharing? And I've noticed at this meeting, only this particular senior leader speaks, and everybody seems scared to change,
Mm.
to say something that's different from that person. All of that is the culture, and as a leader, those are questions I want leaders to ask and to realize that they create the culture. I'm going to give you one more example.
Sure.
Um, when people don't take vacation, if we look at people and whether they take vacation, I'll have very high level leaders say to me, I want my employees to take vacation. I believe it's very important. And then I say, now when you're on vacation, how often do you check messages? How often do you check email? And they look kind of sheepish and they say, well, I check it. And so what they're conveying to their employees is a vacation is a change in venue, but it's not truly a vacation.
Mhm.
And that is a huge indicator of culture. We work all the time, or we turn ourselves off.
Mhm. And that is different in different countries.
Oh,
Absolutely.
absolutely, absolutely.
And so you have a team that's a global team, and some are in the United States, some may be in Spain, some may be in China. The work culture could be extremely different. So tell me a little bit about what you see as a positive work culture or a positive work environment.
In a positive work environment, there's going to be a huge degree of trust. And when I talk about trust, I don't mean that if I leave my wallet out and I'm gone for a few hours, I'll come back and it'll still be there. I mean, that is actually a tangible form of trust.
Mhm.
But in the workplace, trust means, Linda, that if I say I'm going to be on your segment, and I'm going to take part in this, I'm going to show up
Mhm.
unless an act of nature has occurred.
Sure.
That's trust. Another form of trust is if an employer or colleague tells me something that makes them vulnerable, that they've had a medical condition, or their family members going through a legal issue,
Mhm.
that if as colleagues tell one another, I will hold that information and never use it against them in a meeting, or to say, well, they shouldn't be promoted because their son's going through this legal situation. That trust means that hold you're going to always put a person's best side forward, and you're not going to say unkind things about them behind their back, or things that would not help them to progress in the organization.
And on that same line of thought, let's say I'm the employee that I've trusted that information for you and you're not going to share it, I also trust that you won't share it. So the trust is coming from both directions, I'm
Oh,
assuming.
absolutely. And
Mhm.
this thing about trust in an organization and in life is it's you put trust in, you put trust in, you put trust in, you think of it as a big bucket. But one single incident can create the tiniest
Mhm.
pinhole of a leak, and then trust can be destroyed. It only takes one. It's not like a savings account where if you take one withdrawal, there's still a whole lot of money.
Mhm.
The trust bucket can be destroyed in a nanosecond, and leaders sometimes destroy trust by saying something like, "You don't like that? I'll just fire everybody and start again." That
Mhm.
comment made publicly, that destroys culture.
Mhm.
No one feels safe, and we need to feel emotionally safe in our organizations. So trust is an interesting thing because you build it, you build it, you build it, but it doesn't take much to destroy it in record time.
And let's talk about that. So then you start going from this positive work culture and it starts to become toxic. So what are what contributes? What circumstances contribute to making something more toxic besides what you just mentioned, which was the trust?
Well, I do a program called Blame, Shame, and It's Not My Fault. And that
Mhm.
was developed for a particular organization. Whenever there was a problem, the first thing people went to is it's that department. They didn't get the
Mhm.
inventory. It's that it was never how can here's the situation. How can we make it better? It was not future focused, and it was not problem solving focused. It was who can we blame? And when
Mhm.
people are blaming, that destroys trust. It's a very toxic culture. You'll notice that um, it creates silos where every department tries to protect their own department.
Mhm.
There's fewer sharing of resources being manpower, financial resources. Um, in that positive work environment that we were talking about earlier, what you'll see is, suppose that, I mean, we had this a few years ago, and it's still, some organizations are still suffering from it. There was a supply chain issue. We
Mhm.
couldn't get what we needed to do the work. In a positive work environment where culture is positive, everybody's pitching in saying, well, we could do this, or maybe we could call this manufacturer. Years ago, I worked with this person. Let me call them up. And in a toxic work environment, what you'll see is, well, supply chain's your problem. It's not my problem. When you figure it out, you let me know.
Mhm.
So a positive work culture, everybody's focused on how do we meet the business need and how can we do that together successfully. In a toxic one, it's I'm doing my part, leave me alone.
Mhm. Mhm. And so so the leader, what is the leader going to do to navigate these situations if they do arise in that particular organization?
Well, the leader needs to be very acutely aware of what's going on in the organization, how people interact with one another. They need to be noticing that.
Mhm.
Um, it's not a one and done. There's not one thing you can do. Like we know if you want to improve your tennis game, you would take tennis lessons,
Mhm.
but one tennis lesson isn't going to do it. So what we want is a leader who's always looking at this and always trying to improve culture. One
Mhm.
of the things I tell people is organizations are not static. They are always changing.
Mhm.
So if you're not moving them to get better, they will get worse because they're not going to stay in the same place. Even if you get them in a good place, you have to one of the best organizations I ever worked with was with a human resource director and a leader, a senior leader who understood this. And as soon as you finished one thing, they'd say, okay, so what should we do next? Because they knew if they weren't constantly improving,
Mhm.
they were going to move in. And it's not quite as bad as that trust that we talked about, where it can be disintegrated in a minute.
Mhm.
But leaders have to constantly be looking at the programs and tools that will bring their groups together and teach them leadership skills. Because I mean, everyone is a leader. Everyone in an organization is a leader. I do a program on that. You don't have to have title to be a
Mhm.
leader. And how you talk and empower others is are people throughout the organization acting like leaders? Are they making decisions, or you know are decisions being made at the lowest level or at the highest level?
Well, that makes me think, Karen, if you said everybody's a leader or the goal is for everybody to empower them that they are a leader. Let's say you're in a situation that is somewhat toxic and somebody's given responsibility to fix it, but they're not the actual leader. Like, how do you go about that?
Well, we teach everybody to act like they're a leader.
Okay. Mhm.
um, make the decisions that they can make. Don't pass them up. um, we teach managers, when people make decisions, to support them, unless they're, I mean, usually when people make decisions, it's because they're two or three good choices, so none of them are bad.
Mhm.
So we want to empower people to do that. We It's a systems approach, so we teach everyone to act like a leader. I tell people, if we actually are being videotaped right now, Linda, but I say, if we were videotaping just your side of the conversation,
Mhm.
just your actions, we couldn't see the other side, would you be proud of yourself?
Mhm.
Would you be proud of the way you handled it? Would you be proud of the way you responded to it? If we saw only your email or only your chat message, would you would it look good? Would you be proud of it? Would you say this is something that shows leadership, or have you just passed it on to somebody else?
And so here's a scenario. You want everybody to be a good leader, and somebody steps up to be a leader, but somebody above him or her is not happy with that. How do you deal with that when you're empowering everybody to be leaders, but there, in some organizations, there is that hierarchy? So how are you a leader to somebody above you?
I am coaching somebody right now with that very same problem.
Okay, great.
That is a very realistic question. Um, so the answer is that person needs individual coaching. The leader, the named leader, needs individual coaching.
Mhm.
Needs And again, that's culture.
Mhm.
In our culture, in many organizations' culture, that is appropriate. In some cultures, it is not.
Mhm.
But in this particular organization, that is the culture they're trying to instill, that
Mhm.
people be empowered in that way, employees. And so individual coaching. For this particular individual, we've actually created some rules. Like, um, if someone comes to you with an idea, you you explore it, and you have others look at it together. And we've created some panel situations so that that person's opinion is not so strong.
Hmm.
But there's not a one size fits all. That's why you have a consultant and why you have a coach.
Hmm.
If there's one size fits all, you literally could take a book off the shelf and say,
Right.
do this and
I'm,
this and this
I'm
and
a
this.
leader.
I'm like, yeah, yeah, yeah. So that's why it gets it's an art, not a rubric. A
Right.
rubric.
And you made me think of something, but I'm holding back and I'm not going to say it until I ask you this question. And that is because this is called Speak, Sound, and Look Like a Leader. Karen, what do you think is an essential skill so that somebody can speak, sound, look, and even act like a leader?
High emotional IQ,
Hmm.
without a question, uh,
Hmm.
which means a whole lot of different things. But nobody's perfect. All of
Hmm.
us have blind spots, but those with a high emotional IQ know the areas in which they are struggling, and they surround themselves with other people who are good at their weakness, and who have a comfort level to have a dialogue like this, Linda, where it's not scripted. We can talk. We can disagree. The dialogue is welcomed, and opinions are honored. So high emotional IQ.
Okay, that's great. And I wasn't expecting that. I was thinking more, which is part of it, the listening skills, because you have to listen to the person, even if you're above them in the hierarchy. Listen first, which is
Well,
part of emotional IQ.
listening is a huge part.
Hmm.
Listening and not defending and not pushing back.
Right.
But listening skills without implementation skills, confidence, persuasiveness, the things you teach, um, that won't do it by itself. You can be a fantastic listener, and I've been around some leaders who are
Hmm.
fantastic listeners, but have trouble motivating the force.
Hmm. Right. You still need the people skills or the emotional intelligence. Karen, we can talk about this for hours, and I know we don't have that time here today, but how can people get in touch with you if they want to reach out to you?
Oh, I'm always happy to do a complimentary session. They can reach me at Karen@KarenSnyder.com, SNYDER.com, and that's also my website, KarenSnyder.com.
Hmm.
And send me an email. The phone number's there, and we'll set up a complimentary call to hear what's going on in their organization, especially and even if they don't have the title leader.
Okay, that's good because everybody can be a leader. Right?
Everybody is a leader.
Right, right. And they should know that and feel that and act that way too. Now, again, we can also connect on LinkedIn. So let's not forget about that
Oh,
since we're here
absolutely.
speaking today. Reach out to either one of us on LinkedIn and we welcome your comments. We welcome conversations with you. And Karen, thanks so much for sharing your expertise. I know we've talked a lot, but we never really narrowed it down and just had this conversation. So I love to hear about your expertise and what you're so good at because you
Oh,
have great information to share.
well, Linda, it was a pleasure. I knew it would be, and it absolutely was. It was. Thank you so much for
Sure.
asking.
Sure. And again, please join us in 2 weeks on October 10th when I interview Dr. Irvin Nugent, who is a partner at Copia Leadership, and he's another colleague from NSA. There are some phenomenal people that I've met at the National Speakers Association. And then we're going to discuss, which is a great lead in, how to harness the power of your emotions for effective leadership. And that's just what Karen was talking about. So, Karen, thanks for the lead in to our next interview. And it was great speaking with you. And until we have another interview here, let's think about how we can create a positive culture in our leadership teams and how we all are leaders. And so we have that opportunity to show up at work and be a leader, no matter where we are in the hierarchy. Karen, thanks again. It was great talking to you.